Okay. So just a little bit about our program today. It's organized into three main sections. The first part is 30 minutes of worker stories with folks from Amazon and Tech Worker Coalition, the Washington Post Tech Guild, and Pinterest. The second portion is organizing strategies with folks from the National Employment Law Project, What We Will, and DSA Tech Action. We'll have 15 minutes of Q&A, and then in the end, we have breakout sessions. This is optional, but we really, really hope that you'll join. We created this space with the hope that folks can have a chance to connect with one another. So if you're able to join, I know it makes for a bit of a longer call. We have a bunch of amazing facilitators from Civic Spark and other volunteers who are eager to facilitate a good conversation with you. So with that said, I'm just going to pass on to our first speaker from Amazon and Tech Worker Coalition.
Hey everyone, so glad that you're able to join us today. Just as a brief introduction, so I've been working with the Tech Workers Coalition for the past 2.5 years. You'll hear a lot more about kind of what we do. But if you're interested and you haven't checked us out, I definitely encourage you to join our Slack and get connected to folks who can kind of build a community for you as you're navigating the land of like tech confusion. I'm really glad to be here to speak on behalf of somebody who has been recently laid off. In case you aren't familiar, there has been multiple waves of layoffs, I think hitting the industry at large, hitting the world in the workforce in general. But one thing that is distinct to me is that as a former Amazon worker, we've gone through like massive waves of layoffs. I'm not sure if other folks on the call were impacted. If so, would love to connect with you and kind of hear more about your experiences. But I just to kind of start from the beginning, I was there for a total of almost 4 years. And through my time there, I had probably gone through 5 rounds of layoffs. And within the span of 1 year, I have also changed managers 5 times. That alone, I think, has kind of kept me in a position where I felt really, really vulnerable and kind of like not in the best position to get support from my team and get support from my colleagues. And so that was already as like a baseline setting me up for a very difficult work experience. And then kind of from there, as I'm navigating the experience of being laid off, there was actually one first wave that happened in October of last year. And around that time, there was pretty much an internal confirmation that a second wave was going to get announced sometime in early 2026. And I think one thing that felt very distinct about this experience is if you're familiar at all with AWS, there's a very large conference of sorts that happens in the wintertime. And a large population of AWS employees were not laid off in October of last year, but then they were laid off in January. And so the internal kind of philosophy and thinking around that is you as leadership did not want to lay off the people that were running this event in December, but then we're willing to see them as redundant and replaceable by the time um, 2026 rolled around. And so I think that really sets up a narrative that shows like how does the workforce and the bosses, how do they actually view the workers that they are employing? And then that kind of gets hit with this larger narrative around AI. So I think if you go and research anything around Amazon, a lot of the messaging of why we're having layoffs, there are still small waves. Like, for example, in New York City, there was another wave of several hundred people earlier this week. And a lot of it is flagged to AWS, and a lot of it is flagged due to AI being able to take over certain roles. So you have kind of two paths happening. You have a very large kind of umbrella that says, hey, AI is something that can take over a lot of these program management roles, that can take over a lot of operational roles. Like, we no longer need this kind of bureaucratic bloat. And then the second half that you see, which is very specific to, I think, the tech worker experience, if you're working as a developer, an engineer, somebody who's doing something more technical, you have teams internal who are building AI solutions that will be responsible for their future colleagues getting laid off. And so I think it's really pitting a lot of workers together. It's creating a lot of overall job insecurity, and there's a strong fear. It feels like if you don't get laid off, you also are experiencing a tremendous amount of kind of force and impact, largely because so many people have to take over the work or people are very scared. In particular, workers who are in vulnerable positions are going to feel even more worried about it. So, um, my kind of purpose in being here is to make sure that folks realize like these layoffs are something that have been happening for a long time, and the tech industry is continuing to do that. My kind of there's no like real solution. There's no magic wand that I can wave and then help people feel safe and secure. But the thing that I think will get you closest is to be able to join an organization like the Tech Workers Coalition, or to talk with your coworkers and build some sort of collective power, so you really understand like what is going on, what are the material conditions that you're operating within, and what is the best way that you can kind of move forward from that. I'm really glad to be here today to be able to emphasize like all the resources that um, what we will has to offer, and the ways in which we can also start building community even on this call today. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk. I think one thing that really stands out to me is like Amazon does not have a recognized union. We do not have the infrastructure around having a unionized workforce that will give us protections ultimately to help us in the face of layoffs. There's no way to kind of strategically and officially um, fight for that from management. And I think that seeing examples of other workforces that do have unions where they're able to sit there and talk and negotiate about having protections around AI, around having protections around what happens if you get put on a performance improvement plan. Like those are all very specific things that I think can go a really long way. And so my experience as somebody coming from a workforce that doesn't have that, it feels very like visceral. It feels very much like, oh, I don't see that as something that we're able to have right now. And that is something that I think every workforce should be organizing towards. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I do want to make sure that that is something that people know and kind of take away, as my experience is very distinct from other folks. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. If there are questions, please put it in the chat. I'm happy to answer them as we go.
Does anyone have any questions for TWC and Amazon at the moment? We'll also get back to Q&A session a little bit later.
I I don't think I have a question for Amazon in particular. Um, and maybe this is better for the Q&A session, but a lot of the jobs that I'm like starting to apply to and looking at, they're not necessarily like tech companies. They're a tech role within, healthcare or a bank or something. And so I'm curious about how to build a coalition in that space. But again, this might be like,
No, that's a really great question, and I think that's something that if I can kind of speak for TWC. So TWC, just to give some extra clarity, we are not a union. We are the Tech Workers Coalition. Something that I particularly admire about TWC is that our definition of a tech worker is intentionally loose because we recognize the kind of pervasiveness of the tech industry. There are lots of people who work as like a tech role in a different industry. There are lots of people who sit behind a computer and build out programs. There's like a lot of, I think, internal discourse also around what counts as a tech worker. But when we organize, we're really thinking about people, and our origin has really kind of started from the relationship between tech workers and cafeteria workers at tech offices. And so we're trying to make a coalition, both of organizations, but also as individuals, of people who are impacted by the tech industry. And so that's really inclusive of, when we think about like Uber drivers. You are an employee of Uber. Uber is a tech company. When you think about like content moderators who are managing AI systems, like those are not at the forefront of white collar tech industry, but those people are very much affected by kind of the larger global value chain of tech. And so, my first suggestion is that we would love to have you join the Tech Workers Coalition. If you go to techworkerscoalition.org/subscribe, you'll be able to fill out a form and kind of join our Slack. That's like kind of a first step to getting connected to a lot of folks. And there are a lot of great resources as to what it means to build a coalition and to build at least some resources. You don't have to be in a tech company to be able to start organizing your company. And kind of beyond that, there's lots of organizing skill trainings that I'm happy to connect you with, or you can join our Slack and kind of check out as well. But I think that's really like the next step. There's a lot of movement and momentum right now. I think a lot of eyes are on the tech industry because, like, how could you not look at the tech industry with what's going on? Tech is becoming extremely interrelated with like the military. Tech is becoming or not even becoming, tech has always been extremely complicit in a lot of these larger systems of power. And so I think there's a lot of interrogation of that right now. So we would really love, as Tech Workers Coalition, but also just in general as a group of workers, to kind of come together and make sure that we can continue to wield our power. And whether that looks like creating more commonplace campaigns, there's like strategic ways to target companies. There's strategic ways to build out some sort of like public campaign, but also internal campaign. So depending on your company and kind of what you're looking for, I think TWC can at least help point you in the right direction.
We can take one more question for Helen and then we'll move on to our next speaker, Hazel. I also wanted to put in the chat, there's a survey for just folks that are coming. If you can please take a few moments to fill this out. I think there was a hand raised. Who was the last person who had a question?
I can ask a question maybe. So what kind of resources would Tech Workers Coalition have for, I guess, someone who doesn't, because I don't have a job right now and I would like to start looking at tech right now. I'm not someone who's already in the field really, but I was looking to at one point when I was in college. So like, I guess what kind of resources might there be for someone like me, or would it be valuable for someone like me to join? Like, would there be a place for me, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually, I think that in terms of direct resources, perhaps Caitlin and What We Will is probably a more specific way to provide some of the resources that you're looking for, especially as somebody who's trying to break into tech. But the Tech Workers Coalition, at its core, right, like, we have resources in the form usually of programming. So we'll have either in person conferences, in person events based on kind of local chapter activity, or we'll have digital events. And then we usually, in terms of trying to help you break into the industry or trying to help you find a job, we have like a small job board. People will post roles at the companies that they're at. We have also in the past done things like a co-working space where people can do body doubles and like interview prep. So there's a lot of kind of like loose structure we would be able to help you with. And I think the biggest resource for somebody who's trying to break into tech would probably be being able to hear from a large population of people and their direct experiences. But I do want to make sure that perhaps Caitlin or somebody from the What We Will team can kind of share about the direct resources that y'all can provide as well.
Yeah, we're also just kind of beginning to figure out what kind of programming would be most helpful and to launch, our various programs. We are very, very new, and so we're really open to your feedback. Some of what we have talked about starting like next week is having daily stand-ups. So if you would just like to have someone, if you're laid off or you're, at a point where you're day is a bit unstructured and you just want to have someone to check in with, set your goals for the day, we have that in the morning, plus job pipeline twice a week and AI learning workshops twice a week and a workshop on policy change. So I can talk a little bit more about that later, but we're very open at this moment to like understanding what are the supports that'll be most beneficial. And so, yeah, please, there's actually going to be a little survey later where we'll ask you exactly those questions. So please feel free to reach out to me, Paul, if you have any like specific things that would be helpful to you. I'd really love to hear from you what those might be.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, we should move on to our second speaker from Washington Post Tech Guild. And if you have additional questions, please put them in the chat and we will be able to get back to them during the QA session. So, Hazel from WAPO Tech Guild.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. Hey everyone, I'm Hazel. I use she, they pronouns. I am a software engineer at the Washington Post. I'm also a guild steward and a mobilization co-chair of the Washington Post Tech Guild. And I see some other Tech Guild people here as well, which is awesome. Um, First, I wanted to do a little audience participation, if that's okay. Would you raise your hand or react or anything like that if you have read an article in the Washington Post? Yeah, lots of people. Yep. That's great. So if you raise your hand reacted, unless you get the physical paper, you have used software built by the nearly 80 tech workers at the Post that management wants to lay off. It's a lot of people. And so a lot of people on the call might be familiar with the journalists, of course, the producers, the sellers, the marketers of the Post. They are facing this layoff too. And over 300 of them are facing job loss right now, along with us. But I am a tech worker. And so I wanted to distinguish a little bit. There is the Post Guild at the Washington Post, and there's also the Tech Guild. The Post Guild has been organized to represent those folks since 1934, almost 100 years. They have actually spent the last 2 weeks bargaining for a significantly better severance package above and beyond what's already guaranteed by their contract and beyond what management wanted to initially offer them, which is awesome. I hope to see like public announcement of that soon. I am, like I said, I'm a software engineer, which means I'm not covered under that. 1 year ago, I might have had nothing in this situation. No severance, no notice, no protections. I might have just woken up one day and discovered that I was locked out. And I can imagine that's a really relatable experience to other people in the tech industry. That's happened to me before. I am a software engineer though. Sorry, going back a little bit. So that kind of experience is why last May, the technologists who make the Post possible in the digital age organized as a sister union of the Post Guild called the Washington Post Tech Guild. It's not just software engineers, like someone was asking. It's also designers, it's product managers, it's IT, it's help desk, it's network engineers, like all kinds of roles that weren't already covered by the Post Guild union that was already there. And in the last like less than a year, we've already like had wins. We've forced management to hand over critical information for bargaining a contract, but also just like helpful to us as a union, that transparency that so many tech workers want these days. When we've also been able to, when management wanted to fire people for not returning to the office, as a lot of us are facing right now, we were able to step in with some folks and got them severance and time to find a new job, beyond what management just wanted to like fire them that day. We also started bargaining on our first contract, like I mentioned, to be able to improve our working conditions. And that means that we are actually in status quo, which is a legal concept. I can drop a link to learn more about that and how that relates to layoffs in the chat right now. But in short, that means management can't make unilateral changes to our working conditions, and that includes layoffs. Unilateral is the important word there. If there is bilateral agreement, maybe that can happen, but for now, we are supposed to be protected from layoffs. So what's happening to me? Officially, I still have my job, but management proposed that we roll over, give up our legal rights, and let them lay me and almost 80 other people off who are in the same situation as tech workers. So for my troubles, I would get the weakest severance package that I've ever seen. Most of our, union leadership and structure would be gone. And we'd have no more leverage realistically in bargaining if we just accepted what they wanted to do, right? Because management could just propose whatever they wanted, and we just have to say, well, yeah, we did it last time. So why is that happening? Management has said this layoff it relates to, really vague terms, industry transformation, an old software stack, opportunities that will set us up for success, that kind of BS. Being leaner, more agile, and better equipped to handle the challenges and opportunities that whatever that means. They also did, though, key point is mention they're going to continue to drive innovation in AI as part of the call we were all on. How does AI on the ground look here? Leadership left most of the AI management structure in place. From what I understand, they did not fire any AI researchers. They also constructed a new platform team in the AI org. And management was also conveniently, like shortly before this, testing a new AI stack ranking tool that we found out about a few months before the layoff. So I think that is a big chunk of the story here. At the same time, the Washington Post, we're owned by like one of the richest men in the world who is cozying up to an oligarch, Trump. And I think that is also a huge part of the story, right? So what is actually the union, the organization of tech workers at the Post? What are we doing to fight it? So legally, of course, this is illegal. We have sent a complaint to the National Labor Relations Board, which is the federal entity that regulates labor law. And that's all well and good, but that could take months. I mean, it is not a fast process, even by legal standards. And so we have to deal with the material reality of like being on this list of people, right? And yeah, the NLRB is understaffed, like severely, even more than usual, under Trump. So what we have done so far, we have executed a series of actions that have put more and more pressure on management to, halt this layoff. We flooded their email inboxes. We have held rallies outside the buildings. We have hosted Will Lewis's neighborhood, the CEO, which I'm sure, as you've seen, like a few days later, he's out. We have also been reaching out to the community for help, which is like why I even am here today, to tell our story, and to get community members more involved. And we also, like as part of that, we started a fund to help resist the super weak severance offer. Instead of like what many of us would feel like doing, giving up, just, going and trying to find a new job, taking the severance offer. We wanted a fund to be able to push back against that, to give us space and time. And we're also, we're at the end of the day, we're bringing the fight to management. to demand that this layoff cannot go forward. And that is a slightly different position than where the Post Guild is in. But where would we be without this guild if we had not done what we did last year? Like I said, I could very well be completely out of a job, locked out immediately that day. Maybe I would get the week severance, maybe I would get nothing. And certainly, and this is really important, I would have no ability to fight to get anyone's job back. Because as much as like a good severance offer sure means a lot to many of us, like having more money is great, having more time is great, but some folks, they just can't lose their job right now. So a lot of you might be wondering, okay, what's going to happen in the next few months? I can't predict everything, of course, but management could try to deny our right to keep the status quo. They could deny our right to bargain our contract and deny our right to keep our jobs. They could try to hurt people that are not on the layoff list if they participate in actions. The 200 or so people that are not currently, at least, under threat of layoff. They could also go back on their still very weak offer of severance. That would be illegal, but they could do it. And our only recourse would, of course, be the very long legal process or like materially pushing back. And so that's why I'm here today, is like, this is part of the process right here, is reaching out to community members, telling them what's happening. And also I have like 2 asks for people. One, if you have any job postings from whatever company, if you have referrals especially, we are collecting those to share internally with folks that are impacted. Because at the end of the day, that might be the route they have to go down. And we want to make sure people are set up for a good connection. The other thing is, like I mentioned, we have started a mutual aid fund. That is linked on the website, but I'm also going to drop it in the chat if folks haven't seen it. I see David also posted it earlier too, which is great. And so, like I said, that is going to help us push back against the weakest severance offer that I have ever seen. Yeah, and just like help anyone out who needs that extra bit for connection to the next thing or to help keep their job. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so that's all I have for today. I'm really glad to have this chance to share a story, connect with the community, make asks of you all, but also just like see some familiar faces, which I'm really happy to see. So yeah, thank you. I see there's some questions in the chat already. I will do my best to answer them over the course of this call. We also have questions later for the panelists. Yeah, and feel free to DM me with anything I can answer as well. But with that, I will pass it back.
Thank you so much, Hazel. Yeah, let's take one question and then move on to Bonnie, and then we'll have a chance again to take more questions later on in the Q&A session. I think I saw one hand raised for a very, very long time. Would that person want to speak up?
That was me, but sorry, Hazel, do you go by they or she?
Either is fine.
Okay. Hazel had, I think, answered it. I was just like actually gonna ask, like, so does that mean that you did get laid off and you're getting a severance, but you haven't gotten laid off yet. You've just been shown a shit severance agreement and with the opportunity to bargain for a better one? Or no?
Yeah, so
And you
management,
probably answered this, and I'm ADHD, like my ADHD brain can't handle comments and stuff. So sorry.
it is very confusing, and that's partly like benefiting management, I think, in this instance. David, did you want to field that, or did you also have a question for me?
Oh, I would love to fill this. Okay, so our
Great.
legal position is that these
Do you
layoffs
want
are
to introduce
unlawful.
yourself?
Oh,
Do you
hi, I'm
want to?
David Pham, co-secretary of the Washington Post Tech Guild. I am one of the 76 people who are listed to be laid off. And we said, screw you, management. We're not taking this package. And these 76 people that have been proposed to us to lay ourselves off, we said, no, that is stupid. We're not going to do that. That's our legal position. Our lawyer, Danielle, went to the head of legal counsel for the Washington Post Tech Guild, just mapping out, like, look, this is status quo, this is unlawful, blah, blah, blah. The Jay came back. He said, like, look, we're signing the Supreme Court case that allows for entrepreneurial changes. And our lawyer said back, look, okay, that's fine, but you got to demonstrate, you got to show proof. You can't take on the face value that you're closing down product lines or business lines of business. If you are able to show that, then there's a exception for laying off tech workers. To our knowledge, that hasn't been the case. The apps team still continues to this day. The subscription team continues to be this day. Help desk, designers, product managers, everybody in our coalition, everybody in our tech guild still are continuing their work. So to kind of also answer like this kind of Schadenfreude, no, that's not it. What was that physics cat story? What's that called?
Schrodinger's
Schrodinger's
cat?
Schrodinger's
cat,
cat.
save it.
We're in a Schrodinger's cat layoff. We don't know until April 10th. And the legal piece of it is really important, as I kind of noted, but the power piece is extremely important as well. We have to continuously put pressure on the company. The company will not move unless we show collective action. Jay's whole focus, his whole job is to say no to us. And going back to Hazel's main point here, the reason why we can have this fight is because we organized, we unionized, and we're now here fighting for our jobs or trying to build a much improved severance package for those who want to move on. And it really starts with being here and leaning on each other. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, David. I'm going to pass on to Bonnie because we're kind of running behind on schedule for today. Bonnie, would you share your story from Pinterest?
Absolutely. So a perfect segue would be to say, what happened to me is what happens when you do not unionize or make a guild or talk to other humans. So back in January, it was a Monday, and I was talking to one of my colleagues, also on my team at Pinterest, and I said, it's a little odd. I feel like I haven't had any meetings with people outside our team in kind of a long time. And she said, yeah, me too. She had been at Pinterest for like 8 or 9 years. So she had been involved in like all the major launches, everything that the company had been doing for a really long time. I'd been at Pinterest for 1 year as a full-time employee, as a product designer. And then before that, I was a contractor working on icon and illustration systems. So they converted me, which was really exciting at the time. I was super jazzed to be joining full-time and to get healthcare and all of those great things. That Monday turned out to be the day before I was laid off, and she was laid off, and a whole bunch of other people. It was about 15% of the company, and my own team went from manager plus like maybe 10 people that she was managing to 2. So we were really, really heavily impacted. And the only way that I was able to figure out who else was being laid off was to calendar snoop, just going in and looking at who else had a 15-minute meeting on their calendar, because it's a very weird amount of time. And I could see that my meeting was with an HRBP and our VP of design. So I knew this is not going to be good. After getting exactly like Hazel's describing, basically just shut out that afternoon. I was lucky that my call was in the afternoon, so I had the beginning of the day to reach out on Slack, send people text messages, get people's phone numbers so that I can contact them in the future without necessarily having to use LinkedIn, because not everyone wants to. I basically just did a whole bunch of digging and pulled together all the work that I would need for a portfolio and then had the meeting, and that was that. Um, After that, on Wednesday, I decided to post on LinkedIn because I was feeling very frustrated about my role specifically because I'm an illustrator, and Pinterest to me is a place where you go to take action. And so the point of Pinterest is to be able to go look at real things and then potentially incorporate them into your life. And now it is a stream of AI content. It's not applicable. You can't use that to take action in your own life. The way my hairdresser put it is people come to her now with photos they found on Pinterest, but they're not photos, they're images of not real hair. And the issue is the physics of hair does not behave like it does in AI because AI does not understand the physics of the scalp. So she would get images from people and there was nothing that she could do with it. And she would have to tell them, I'm sorry, I can't help you, or I need a different image. And I think that is a perfect encapsulation of how AI slop is impacting people, specifically in Pinterest, but really any social platform where you see things, you can't take action on them. It's just ideas that have no basis in reality and is blocking out the work of people actually creating things that you could take action on. The same issue comes up in interior design, in cooking, anything where you're having to use real world things. AI comes in, makes it look really pretty, and also makes it impossible. So the reaction I got on LinkedIn was absolutely overwhelming. I had hundreds of messages and texts and DMs and emails of people saying, what you said, I've been feeling for a long time, but I haven't had the courage to say it, or I didn't know how to phrase it, or they feared retribution because the kinds of things that we are allowed to say after we lose our jobs is to be like, oh my gosh, what a great 5 years at company name. I worked with so many great people, and we did. But it's so like this and that kind of voice, and we're all going woo because it's very scary to say that your employer did anything wrong or that you are upset or that somebody made a bad decision because you don't want to be seen as a spicy troublemaker. And you know that when you apply for the next job, you don't want someone to look back on your LinkedIn and go, well, I like their background, but I don't, they're maybe kind of risky to hire. And so I knew that it was, if I said something and it was not that fluffy, nice, meaningless, just words that are essentially just kowtowing to the man, I knew it was a risk, but I also felt I am one of the only people in this position where I can afford to do this because I am still freelancing. If you're not familiar with my work, I will tell you that yes, you are, because I designed all of Netflix's icons and Roblox and Chanel and Nordstrom and just an enormous list. So I've worked with companies, tech companies, fashion, education, pretty much everything across the board. And so if I can't say something with the amount of privilege that I have, who is going to say anything? And so I figured it's the time for me to speak up. And I'm doing it very much as like a person of one. But I think that that is another way that you can reach out to people and find other people in a similar position who might share your opinions if you're willing to talk about this in a more public way rather than just saying what is already acceptable. Because if we don't say anything outside of ourselves, nothing is going to change. We need to make it so that they can only hire spicy people because we all need to be spicy. We all need to stand up for the shit that we care about because we're going to run out of time because the AI is not spicy and it's not funny, and we have to be, because that's all we have is conviction. And so that's me. I'm Bonnie Kate. I would love to answer any questions you have in the Q&A about this or anything else I can help with.
Awesome. Just in the interest of time, thank you so much, Bonnie. Yeah, that was amazing. Please ask your questions during the Q&A session. We're going to move on to Andrew Stetner from NELP. Andrew, you can speak and I'll change the slides when you say to do so.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks so much to the Workers Coalition for inviting us to be part of this. I'm going to talk a little bit about folks' rights, when they lose their job or are worried about losing their job, and the kind of things we should be fighting for collectively. You can go and go to the next slide. So if you haven't heard of the National Employment Law Project, we've been around for a little more than 40 years, fighting for low-wage workers and the unemployed, partnering with worker centers and unions to create a good jobs economy. Go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk first about unemployment benefits. In the 1930s, unions fought for unemployment benefits. So workers would not be so beholden to the boss and the ups and downs of capitalism. So, the first thing is that this is your right. You've worked for it. And if you do lose your job, and you should apply for unemployment benefits right away. And here's the link where to find in your state how to apply for unemployment benefits. When you do that, be ready. Get all your documents in order, your work documents, personal documents, ID documents, so you don't have to apply and stop and do it all over again. Be ready for there to be identity verification. In most states, a selfie match, online tool where you have to verify that you are, in fact, who you say you are. And you should be able to be done with this process of applying for unemployment benefits online in between 30 and 90 minutes. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So, the unemployment insurance is an imperfect system. And that's one reason I'm so excited to be with you all and think about fighting for a better system. So let me just talk about where we are. Who's eligible for unemployment benefits? You generally need at least 6 months of recent work history to get unemployment benefits. You have your reason for being out of work has to be considered a little illegal here, involuntary. What does that mean? Well, that means you're laid off, like Hazel was just talking about. You quit your job, but for a really good reason, especially something that your employer did that made you quit, like sexual harassment. You're fired, but for not doing something that breaks a rule or a law, but just because it didn't work out or your boss didn't like you. Those people should get unemployment benefits. When you apply for unemployment benefits, you have to not have work. It's for people who are unemployed. You definitely cannot, you either not have full-time work or you can be really working very a little bit part-time and get benefits. And lastly, you have to be available for work. That means that you right now you're out of work. If a job is offered to you, you'd be able to do it. So that's who's eligible. Let's talk about who's not. The biggest problem are independent contractors. We just heard in some of our presenters, some people start as contractors. Those workers are generally not eligible for unemployment. But I put a question mark there because oftentimes companies will call you a contractor when you really should be an employee. So, for example, in New York and Massachusetts and California, those who work for gig worker companies like Uber and Lyft, in fact, are eligible for unemployment benefits because those workers have fought for their eligibility. The flip side of that thing about being experienced, if you're a student, if you just started working, you're not going to be eligible for benefits. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this. Immigrants without work authorization cannot receive unemployment benefits. You can go and go to the next slide. So if you are lucky enough to get benefits, and I say lucky because nationally, unfortunately, only about 1/3 of unemployed people get benefits because of some of the problems we've been talking about. Here's how much you would get. It really ranges by states. Every state has a lot of room to run their own program. As high as $750 on average per week in Washington to just $225 in Mississippi. The maximum is obviously a little higher. For example, the maximum in New York is $869 per week and $1,150 in Washington State. And usually you can get up to 26 weeks of benefits. I saw someone put in the chat that that's not enough, but that's usually what you can get in unemployment benefits. So you can go and go to the next slide. So here's and hopefully you get a little sense of who is eligible and not for unemployment benefits. One reason that people don't get them, even though they should, is they don't take action to protect their rights to these benefits. Unemployment is a weekly program. So basically, it's a payment you get every single week. Unlike a job, you get paid every 2 weeks. Unemployment, you get paid every week, and they're paid out for each week of unemployment. And it's kind of same thing you would do at a job. You would punch your time card. You have to do the equivalent in unemployment. You have to call in every week to certify that you're unemployed. And so even while you're waiting, like I submit my application on April 1st, I might not hear back for 3 weeks whether I'm eligible or not. You want to file every single week you're unemployed. You want to file that you're eligible. That way, when your application is approved, you get all those payments at once. And if you miss those certifications, states may not pay you. The backdating rules are kind of all over the place. Um, so you have to go qualify. You go online or you call and we call it certifying your unemployment every week. So in addition to that, you're also required to search for a new job. Part of what the law considers you to be unemployed. It means you're looking for work. So you're searching, for a new job. So that, some places just require you to write down what you did. Other places will require you to go online and write in your job search every week. Most places will, if you're unemployed for a while, most states will have you have an appointment with someone to talk about what kind of job you're looking for. Follow those rules, really carefully and learn those rules. Lastly, if you're denied benefits, you should file an appeal. Usually it's 15 days or 30 days after you're denied to file an appeal. Even if you don't have to be a lawyer, even if you're not sure why you would appeal, just file that appeal. You can research it yourself, or you can find a legal aid lawyer, talk to someone in your union, but definitely appeal if you're denied your benefits. And then why are there appeals? Why is this, such a challenge? The unemployment system has that word insurance in it. That's because employers, they pay a premium for that. When more of their former employees get benefits, their premiums go up. So they have an incentive to contest your claims so they can bring it to an appeal. So you have to watch out for that. Often if your employer says, no, that person, in fact, they quit, I didn't lay them off, you have to respond back to that. You'll get a questionnaire or a phone call. And that goes to my last point. There is after the initial application, there could be follow-up questions that you have to fill out throughout your claim. Watch your email inbox and watch your snail mail. There are still states that will just send you your material by snail mail. Sometimes they actually only send you a notification in your portal. You have to log on. So just really have to watch for comms every week. So that's the unemployment system. I hope it's a quick overview. We can have questions in the chat, or you can ask me. Let me talk a little bit about some of the other layoff protections we have and don't have, in the United States. You can go ahead and go on to the next slide. Well, as we've heard in our last three panelists, if you're not a union, you don't have a lot of rights. You don't have you can be fired any day in every state except Montana without any reason. And you have no right to severance. Only a union contract gives you those rights. And that's why we saw last year, for the first time in, I believe, a decade or more Americans are in a union. There's higher union densities than the year before because young people, in particular, people in the tech industry, they're organizing into unions. Unions did fight for the WARN Act. This is a law that requires that employers give 60 days of notice in what's called a mass layoff. That means that they're closing down an entire work site. They're laying off more than 500 people, or if it's less than 500 people, then it's at least 1/3 of the workforce is laying off. And if they don't provide you that notice, you as a worker and your group or a group of workers can sue, and you can get up to 60 days of back pay if you're fired immediately without the proper notice. And we know that, we heard a little bit, right now people are thinking about, where are they going to go with their career. And we don't have enough retraining rights. We should have everyone who's laid off should have the right to retraining. But we do have retraining that's available, for free. We know that the best training out there is an apprenticeship, particularly in a union that will give you a job at the end. But there's additional training that's federally funded, either short-term or long-term. Probably the best two ways to get access to training are to go to your local community college or to go to what's called a career one-stop center. These are in every region, there's one or more places where you can go and get access to retraining. In about 10 states, New York, California, Georgia, Maryland, a few others, you can get an additional 26 weeks of benefits. So basically a total of a year if you're in a retraining program. So that's, another right that we have fought for effectively. You can go on to the next slide. So I'll put in the chat, the link for those one-stop career centers. So then folks ask me a little about immigrant workers, a lot of concerns. They have very limited rights to unemployment benefits. Some labor laws, like minimum wage, apply equally to immigrants and non-immigrants. Unemployment is not one of those. You have to be work authorized when you're working and also while you're unemployed. So that would be like a legal permanent resident. But many other visa holders, like H-1B, which is I know very important in tech, will not have that work authorization once they lose their job. And H-1B holders have a lot of other concerns. They only can maintain their status, for 60 days before finding their job or switching to another status like tourist or student visa. So we can go to the next slide, the last one. So look, workers deserve better than this. Laid off workers should, be able to get support they need to keep themselves whole, keep, everything you've worked for in your career, your home, your family, and then be able to transition into a new job. Um, you know, so we should have transition benefits for everyone, right? Income, healthcare support, retraining, and I like people say for at least a year is what I've always said. You at least need a year to get your footing, after you've lost a permanent job. Those facing the AI transition, they have specific needs for career guidance. We may be facing industries where certain occupations just may not exist anymore. So we need new government and private funded pilot programs for these workers so we can prepare for the potential of maybe much bigger dislocations with AI. Um, when companies bring a new technology in that's going to change or displace someone's job, there should be a law that you should be notified, about that, have a chance to retrain for something different, and ultimately receive severance, whether or not in a union. How are we going to pay for these things? We should be taxing AI super profits to pay for the safety net, and the corporations that are doing all these things that are saying they're going to be more profitable, they should be giving a transition funds to workers. And we saw Verizon do that recently in a mass layoff. And I don't know the whole story, but I've always assumed CWA must have been in the loop in securing that retransition fund. And so, the picture here on this is a picture of the hunger strike in New York, one the excluded worker fund in New York, a 2 billion fund for undocumented immigrants during the pandemic. That people said, no, you never win back unemployment benefits, for undocumented immigrants. What we did, we can just go to the next slide. And it was folks like you, that have those victories. ExtendPUA.org was founded by two displaced workers, no organizing experience. And their grassroots online organizing helped deliver $980 billion in aid to the unemployed during the pandemic, kept people in their home, and literally saved thousands of lives. So we can do it. When we organize, we can win. And there's the anxiety that you are talking about on this call. People are feeling it across America. It's really the time to organize together. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Yeah, I really appreciate all of your support. Andrew's been so helpful in giving us also advice in how to start up. So, the next person that's going to present is actually me. I'm going to talk a little bit on behalf of of what we will. So, if you're curious about what we're trying to provide here and what we're building here, here's just the chance for me to just share with you a little bit of what our vision is and what we're building towards. And we really want your participation to help shape this. First, I just really want to give a big shout out to TWC, especially the person named TWC on this call and other folks, Luca, Crystal, Dan, y'all have been so supportive and just like think TWC is an amazing organization. So we're kind of base building and like incubating within TWC right now. When you join What We Will, you'll be joining the TWC Slack as well as some of our additional programming. So just to let you kind of know what the structure is. So yeah, really quickly, this is what I'm going over. Like we're in a point of a lot of uncertainty. We're doing participatory action research. I'll explain to you what some of our programs are and what our vision is for why we fight, how we fight. So yeah, a lot of stuff about AI is not clear right now. One of the big things that stalls like policy and makes things like difficult is that there's a lot of talk about it being too early to take action, or there's just too much we don't know. It's not clear with statistics whether the layoffs are actually due to AI. Maybe the layoffs are due to market corrections after COVID. Maybe it's offshoring. Maybe it's management exerting power over workers. These are all true to some degree. And so, it's a matter of like what degree it's true. One thing that we have right now is just a lack of like good, reliable data. Official data is extremely unreliable about like whether AI is involved in a layoff. And when we try to make it more clear, it actually makes it even less reliable in some ways. So in New York, when a law was passed to add an AI automation checkbox to warn filings to see if AI was involved in the layoff decision, more than 160 companies that had mass layoffs between March to 2025 and this month, refused to check off AI, even though in internal memos and in communication with staff, they had said that AI was one of the reasons that those layoffs happened. And so, this is on one hand a really good model for a state that is trying to start getting good data on like AI and like displacement. But on the other hand, it's like, you know, attempts to get data will result in people avoiding and, messing with the data. So maybe another Schrodinger's kind of analogy from earlier today. Another issue is that there's a lot of AI hype happening, and this is happening within a lot of companies, and there's a lot of pressure from upper management to, say that AI is working. So middle managers are often asked to tell their folks that they're managing to like prop up AI hype. This article I thought was really interesting by Tech Policy by Diana Enriquez documents the specific stories and ways in which people are like making up stuff to say that, oh my God, AI helped me do this. It was so great. Meanwhile, they're like working really, really long hours and fixing the mistakes that AI made. And they're afraid to like push back because it's a really weak job market right now. So people are willing to accept more work and voice fewer complaints. Um, so two of the big questions that like, might make folks hesitant to act on the question of AI right now and like passing bills around AI is AI adoption actually causing unemployment? We don't have enough data to show like for sure how companies use AI to prove that AI is really displacing workers. And the other question is like, what are the new jobs of the future? How can we fund reskilling programs if we don't know what the future jobs are going to be? Meanwhile, you have these tech CEOs that seem to have like super clarity on, the impact of AI, folks saying that like coding is over. Is this hype or, where are we right now with this? I think one thing to note is that it's not just kind of hype, it's like official guiding policy. This is a summary of something published by Boris Cherny at the head of Claude Code, where he said basically recommended companies underfund headcount on purpose because when you put workers under constraint, that's supposed to drive more creative use of AI tooling, right? So layoffs are actually an endorsed experiment. It's another AI experimentation strategy. And this is coming from the people that are building these tools. Um, and so what is the actual harm and impact of all of this? Like we are seeing so much impact. We can't discern how much of it is AI and how much of it isn't, but we have enough patterns to know that AI is playing a big role. We have 108,000 tech workers laid off in January. This was the number from last year, 674 a day, over 783 companies. This is the drop in entry-level worker like roles in sectors that are AI exposed, and it's even higher for software engineers. So software engineers are in this percentage, but I think another statistic I read was that it was over 65% drop in the number of entry-level roles that since 2 years before. And so, the people that are affected most are definitely entry-level workers, H-1B visa holders, women, Hispanic, and Black workers are disproportionately represented among the layoffs, and also older workers. And the damage of the unemployment doesn't just stay in one sector, right? It flows throughout the economy. And what's really important to note is that the speed of that change is as important as like the degree of that change. Right now, things are just happening too fast. 108,000 workers laid off. Like the shock of it is not something that the labor market can easily like absorb. And so, we need to think of like workers are also consumers. So as workers are being cut out of that economic pie, then the bigger pie also gets smaller and smaller. And this is something that's like cyclic. Meanwhile, there's kind of these like kind of insane like ideas, I think, coming out of like, it's really popular right now with various, VC and other like companies that like in the future, everyone's just going to be their own entrepreneur. That's really appealing in some ways, or people are talking about like you're going to have these unicorns that are like billion-dollar companies by like one person. But like, how does that work at scale? Like, who is going to buy the services of these companies, when everyone is unemployed, right? So I guess the thing that we want to focus on and the message that we are trying to like put out there immediately is actually just stop the layoffs, slow it down. Like labor markets can transition, but we have to move more slowly and we have to stabilize income, right? Moving fast and breaking things is not going to bring us to broad prosperity. On like a very individual company level, you might see like short-term net profit from cutting out employees, but that does not actually mean increased productivity, which is what AI is promising, right? Cutting jobs is actually a really lazy way to think about what productivity is, right? And I should challenge companies to think harder. How do you actually generate more overall productivity within a single company and also the total economy without just cutting labor expenditures? Like, what would it look like to supposedly, have real AI productivity? It would mean like growing the pie with like the amount of labor costs, like in terms of percentage, still staying the same. And that would maybe be like some justification of like AI productivity, right? It would mean like people staying in their jobs and their companies actually like creating more wealth in some way, right? And that's not the picture we're seeing. Instead, if people are just being cut from here, like that might be a cost savings for a company, but that should not be confused with increased productivity, right, for the economy. And so, in terms of like where do we find answers to those questions that we talked about before, like these driving questions that are sometimes like used to like stall action or like voice hesitation. Is AI adoption actually causing unemployment to rise? What are the new jobs of the future? We believe that workers are the ones who know the answer to these questions. Like workers know what's really happening inside our companies. We understand the inefficiencies and some of the false promises. We can maybe leverage that information in collective bargaining during a layoff crisis. Like, how can we better organize together, communicate with one another, maybe do media pressure campaigns or like shareholder activism to leverage the information we know? Because we actually have much better picture of like the adoption of AI that we can collect with each other through participatory action research. Also, workers understand where I can be like beneficial in specific tasks and where it's like risky and unethical. This book, actually, this is my former boss, Ben Zweig, recently published a book about job architecture. He often promotes the idea that like jobs are like bundles of tasks and that like those tasks might change in the bundle, but like jobs will stay. So who are the people who are going to be architecting the new jobs of the future? We just really believe that that's got to be the people doing the work now, who understand like where AI can be beneficial, where AI is definitely not beneficial. We should be the ones with a voice on designing like the jobs of the future. So in our efforts, we want to like move from culture to political will to policy. And this is sort of the vision driving like the programs that we're trying to launch at the moment and would really appreciate your participation in. So I'll send a little, if someone can push the poll at the bottom, I'll do that at the very, very end. Our like beginning areas of like work where we're trying to create working groups and build in a mutual aid fashion are in these 4 categories. And I just really want to get a sense of like where folks are on this call, where you might have interest so we can build together. The first one is around collective bargaining. Then there's like kind of more individual technical adaptation, cultural change, and policy change. So talking about like first just the individual changes, I think this is most familiar to people. It's, the daily stand-ups, the like interview prep workshops. I feel like that's like very immediate help and people are kind of familiar with this. I used to teach a boot camp and for a while ran like alumni help from folks. Actually, I still like meet with some of my students and like this is kind of a format that we're familiar with where we can just like hold space for one another. And so we can start with this, which is just like literally like every day. If you are unemployed, I'm going to be on a call on Zoom every day at a certain time. Please come join me. We can like set goals together. And we can like figure out like maybe how to build some of these resources together that would be helpful for you. So, and then have a couple of like civic tech projects that are being are lined up. And some ideas for like building out different solutions with a friend of mine who was let go from USAID. And I think like two groups of people that would be maybe interesting to bring together is like all the massive layoffs of federal workers, and then a lot of laid off tech workers, to see if there are ways of like holding institutional knowledge together or building ideas together. But the purpose of these kind of more individual based like project based learning is like at the end of the day, like I think for most folks like working in software, there's kind of this recognition that like if you don't keep up, you are definitely going to be like left behind. So you do need to like figure out how to like do, AI orchestration, and for that kind of day-to-day stuff, like we can build community around mutual support. Now to the sort of like beyond individual resilience, how do we work for each other? This is the program that I'm really excited about and really, really appreciate folks like being willing to come be part of this. Dan and I have been sort of looking at like SEC filings, like figuring out how to like track and like know when a company is going to be like laying off workers. We want to find a way to connect people who've been laid off with people who are about to be laid off. And we have this like 60-day window where we want to figure out how we can do collective bargaining. This is a question, not an answer. We don't actually have any answers, and we want to like find the answers together with you if you are willing to be part of this process. We wonder if like there are ways to like, yeah, like reach out to these companies, proactively identify workers at risk, connect with workers, to like provide potential like mutual aid. One thing that we were inspired by were ideas around like better job pipelines for H-1B visa holders. So folks have like 60 days to get a job, and like interview processes usually take longer than 60 days. Like, can we help source more employers that might even be willing to sponsor? I mean, with the $100,000 like additional fee, this is a big ask because it really is really like super challenging right now. But if there's a way to sort of gather like support from various companies that do these sponsorships, and have like warm links and stuff, these are the different kind of like ways in which we hope we can like just like make that process a little easier. But the real work I think here is really around like collective bargaining. Like in that 60-day period, what kind of media pressure campaign can you do around what the company is doing? What kind of like ways can you reach out to shareholders about some of the decisions that are being made? Are there people who are willing to speak up? And, we want to start this sort of stop the layoffs campaign, and we want to see if there are ways to just change the narrative around layoffs and position layoffs in general as being like kind of insane and not a great thing for the economy. And this is not the way you benefit from AI productivity. And see if we can just, yeah, as we find out about another company that's about to do a mass layoff, what can we do to support folks from that company? And it would be great if folks are interested in this project. And then like what kinds of wins are possible? Examples of like wins. The New York Times Tech Guild, they have a good contract, and they were able to have these wins because yeah, folks are unionized. But some like great things that they fought for were like rehire lists. So making sure the company commits to rehiring laid off workers first, if they find out that the cuts were bad and they need to have those people back. They fought for one worker who I think, he discovered after he was laid off that like his same position was posted again at like a lower wage and a lower level. And it was the exact same job. And so they basically like laid him off to be able to like pay less to someone else. And, the New York Times Tech Guild fought for him to be hired back at the same senior level with the same wage. And you can see that these are the sort of cost-cutting things that like many companies are doing, whether it's like offshoring or just like reposting as a like a junior level position, what used to be like mid or senior level. But yeah, this kind of like pressuring is possible because like folks are working together and like trying to like shame the company. So what are ways we can do that at like a bigger scale, with more support? And then, yeah, they also have like fought for H-1B visa holders to get more notice time. These are all like really important ways of support. And so, Um, I think a lot of the work that we want to do it ties into sort of participatory action research because I think getting at the end of the day, getting that knowledge, getting that like information is like pivotal to like pushing forward change. So we wonder like, are there ways in which crisis support can also be used to help us through this like process of like PAR if we do it with anonymity and careful protections, not to be like an extractive process, but also as a way to kind of like inform and include people maybe also in the design of it. Those are questions we have. What are the lines between like PAR and crisis like kind of support and like are there ways of like kind of bringing that together in the same kind of conversations that we're having with folks? And then we would love to meet with folks who are willing to help us like change the cultural narrative around layoffs. And so the most targeted thing is just like us wanting to put out there on social media. Also, it'd be great to work with like folks who have PR experience and know how to get like land bigger stories. How do we like question the kind of rationale around layoffs right now and push back against this being even like a sane solution at this time? And then, yeah. Cultural change is usually a little faster than policy change, but it like builds the political will and brings folks together so that we can do these like longer term wins. And so we're trying to figure out like what are the best coalitions to plug into on the state and like federal levels. Asking for help from Andy and his team at NELP and trying to figure out the first thing is just building like a power map to track policy proposals in these three areas. So stronger layoff protection notices and requirements for the WARN Act, income stabilization, including like expanded unemployment insurance and basic income pilots around the country. And then also a list of different structural reforms, like including portable health benefits, which has a lot of nuance and a lot of, like even like inter-movement kind of conflict at times of, and then, the sort of both public and employer funded reskilling programs. Bernie Sanders is like 32-hour work week. AFL-CIO's guidance around like worker representation and AI governance. These are all kind of different policy areas and policy responses. In some ways, they're also like it still feels like it doesn't quite hit the point. And I feel like what Andy said before, of like we need to get the AI companies to pay for the costs of like AI displacement. There's one campaign in New York that kind of it feels like it matches it most closely, which is the Workforce Stabilization Act, which charges like a 2% like additional tax to companies engaged in data mining like I think the idea is for that to go into unemployment, general unemployment, not just not just like AI specific. We're still trying to figure out like how to plug into that work. I think, more bills that are directly like that in terms of like wealth transfer, as well as like basic income are some of the driving like ideas that are exciting for us. And we need to build the experience and the credibility to first like join in other coalitions, maybe support if we're able to mobilize and bring out numbers, that would be our strength, and maybe we can add and learn from other campaigns and over time maybe get to a place where we could take more of a leadership role in our own campaigns. And so for folks that are like policy geeks and like really know how this all works and like is interested in advocacy, I think there's just the process of like being civically engaged that can help folks. Okay, I think I have like spoken way more than I intended, but just in terms of like where we are, like, what we don't want to be paralyzed by uncertainty. We want to take control of the narrative around AI and layoffs. We will define the jobs in the new economy. We should be the ones determining what that looks like. We will organize in solidarity with other workers. So it's not just software engineers. From the founding, we were really thinking actually of like working with call center workers and like really focusing on not just software engineers, but I think our background makes it a little easier to like first start with like organizing with software engineers and maybe like figuring out ways to build coalition with other organized groups that are not, rather than trying to figure out how to like encompass others when we don't have that like experience and identity. And then yeah, we will win. That is where we want to go. So, but thank you for like taking the time to, this is like probably a bit longer than I should have done when we have so much going on today. But this is our vision and what we're excited about. And we just like really want to connect with you to know what you might be excited about and like help build community together. So let me stop sharing. Yeah, I think I took up a lot of time, so I'm gonna let Ajit go right after. And if you have any questions, you can ask later in the Q&A.
Thanks so much. Are you able to pull up my slides, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, I can do that. 1 second.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll just start talking while. Okay, fantastic. It's up. So, first of all, thank you so much, TWC comrades alike, colleagues, and folks who are joining the call on this Sunday afternoon. My name is Ajit Singh. I'm a physician. I'm a technologist. Previously was in labor. I was with SEIU, the CIR bargaining team in Oakland. I since joined Doctors Council, which is also SEIU, with the county health system here in Brooklyn. But I come here on behalf of the DSA Tech Action Working Group in New York City as an organizing committee member. Next slide. I'll try to run through these slides pretty fast so we can catch up on some time. So briefly, what is New York City DSA? Well, DSA, it's the largest socialist organization in the US. We just crossed 100,000 members this month. We have chapters in all 50 states. The New York City DSA, also, we just crossed 14,000 members just this month. So an incredible community and organization thinking about progressive politics. Next slide. Democratic socialism is essentially, the goal is really to give people real control, real agency over economic and political decisions through democratic participation rather through authoritarian rule. And there are a lot of ways that can come up, but generally these policies that arise are like universal health care, education, childcare, supporting worker-run enterprises. Next slide. But what we're doing in Tech Action is really thinking about a socialist perspective on technology. And so how can we enable collective or public governance over technologies? How can we resist hegemony, not just over resources and planning, but also our welfare and our imaginations? How can we build coalitions and provide solidarity to those most vulnerable to the predatory practices? Next slide. I'm just going to touch briefly on some of the campaigns that we're doing. So we have a major access problem for millions of New Yorkers. You know, things like applying for jobs or scheduling appointments with their doctors are impossible because they don't have internet access. You know, prior investments were really handouts to private ISPs. The city has passed a law requiring an internet master plan. We're really fighting to make that mandate come through to build universal and affordable municipally governed broadband, building coalitions all across the city to engage in this democratic process. Next slide. We are similarly working with colleagues in the New York State Fights Data Centers Coalition. Our allies include the Tonawanda Seneca Nation, Bridge Clean Air, Food and Water Watch, AI Now, as well as our peer working group EcoSoc. We recently pushed forward the strongest data center moratorium bill in the country, and quoted here is one of my fellow organizing committee members, Catherine Jin. Next slide. A few of the policy and advocacy efforts that we're involved in, really trying to raise awareness of different surveillance and biometrics tools that are actively being discussed, supporting efforts around No Tech for ICE. Next slide. And a large part of what we do is really political education. So going from the 0 to 1, bringing information to communities, dismantling these myths. What is AI? What are data centers? This event on the right here, data center ecology, is coming up in next week. Next slide. Also doing a range of sessions on technology. What is surveillance? Doing workshops with the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project. Doing collaborations with other groups to, again, bring light to the ways in which tech companies interface and intermediate our lives. Next slide. We've also done a lot of work around educating the general public around AI and labor, holding labor or tech organizing panels. You see on the far right, the Times Guild. We have Kickstarter just after they won an incredible bargain, No Tech for Apartheid, so on and so forth. Next slide. As well as a range of education, again, really trying to reach folks where they're at, looking in healthcare, looking in the gig economy, collaborating with TWC folks, some of which were on this call, and also bringing in artists, bringing in researchers to really dig into these questions. So next slide. This is where I want to get into our conversation. So organizing is difficult. Okay. Organizing labor in these very United States, difficult. And to do so in and adjacent to tech carries many challenges. So the question is, why isn't this all about unionization? Just addressing one of the questions I was raised earlier. For many of us on this call, unionization might seem like just the obvious path, but why hasn't that happened? It's one thing to fight for a higher salary or to improve benefits like fertility care, or just preserve the benefits that you have. But when you're feeling job insecurity, coercion in the setting of layoffs around you, or your employer pits salaried employees against contract labor, or you against the person next to you with an H-1B visa, these are longstanding practices to discipline labor, to manufacture antagonism, distrust, and fear in the office. And so there's a lot more to unpack there. But it's important to note that a union is not an end in and of itself. Okay, it's first and foremost a practice. And in the U.S., as my colleagues previously mentioned, it also just happens to afford particular legal protections and restrictions. So, what is the practice? Organizing is about social relations. It's about meeting people and being in conversation with them. It's about seeing them, and it's about being seen. It may have nothing to do with work. Maybe it's just an expression of empathy for a coworker whose mind is on their sick partner at home, or who's stressed out because the rent is going up. It's built off of a foundation of empathy, trust, and care. And these are the kinds of spaces that we in Tech Action and DSA in New York City are trying to cultivate. So to raise an earlier question around how to build coalitions, I believe that was raised earlier. Tech Action tries to do so by facilitating discussions and social engagements across the 5 boroughs. So in our sessions, we meet people where they're at, we educate from 0 to 1, we help folks understand the stakes of what's happening in tech. And so whether it's demystifying data centers, regulatory capture, internet, ecological crises, dismantling democracy, very light things. At these political education sessions, people come because they know something's wrong. Maybe they need help in understanding why or how. But someone who comes to a conversation about internet policy because they're annoyed by Spectrum, they might leave understanding that our last city investment, the Big Apple Connect program in New York City, put an NYPD backdoor in all public housing cameras for facial recognition and surveillance. Tech workers who might be hearing about how their company's tools are enabling state violence or powering genocide, they leave not only with a better understanding of the problem, but also with new connections to a community that shares their concerns. They're able to take these conversations to their neighbors, their friends, their coworkers, and these conversations catalyze a shared sense of reality and urgency, and an understanding that all of these struggles, all of our struggles, are connected. So in Tech Action, we don't prioritize programming for tech workers because everyone is subject to the decisions of these companies. And so instead, we work to bring more and more people to the fold. And I urge a similar thinking amongst the folks here. Expanding these spaces helps to normalize reframing the questions of what's important and why. I'm sure many of you have seen protests at town halls for data centers, and many of these have succeeded in delaying or canceling permits. Similarly for flock cameras, whose surveillance architecture powers state violence through ICE and DHS. These are the same communities whose collective voice helps to build power. And this brings us to my last point. Next slide. In the workforce, it is a hard pitch to start with the union. And similarly, in our cities, you don't just start with a socialist mayor. It takes time and effort to build these relationships, to build community, to build solidarity, and from which you can build collective power, from which only then can you wield that collective power to start shaping the world around us in a way that prioritizes our well-being and the well-being of our communities and the well-beings of our planet. So for tech workers here, I urge you all to consider what spaces that you're in and where you can lend your presence to support organizing in your communities. If you have technical skills, or if the tools that you wield are literary, illustrative, or otherwise, take the toolbox you have and share your skills with your communities. I would love for folks here to join DSA, or if you're in New York City, come join Tech Action. The water is great. But no matter what, wherever you are, find and join community, or think about building community wherever you go, one conversation at a time, because we really are in this all together. Next slide. And so I would like to just, thank TWC, thank the folks putting this call together, and really just express my gratitude for the folks who have joined this call seeking guidance and seeking information. You already bring a lot of knowledge and wisdom, more than you know. And so I urge you all to expand those communities, bring more people in. This fight does not stop at one union. This fight does not stop at one company's layoffs. This will continue. We have to join forces. It's all connected. And again, just thank you for the time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let's take 2 questions and then go into breakout session because we have some great facilitators that have been wanting to give you the chance to just talk in person with each other in small groups. And you can also ask some of those questions and thoughts that you have in the small group and have more of a chance to chat. So, in terms of the hands raised, I don't see any hands raised. Okay, does anyone want to just jump in and ask a question for one of our panelists?
Sorry.
If I could just ask one really quick for Andrew, someone wanted me to pass this on. If you are a worker who is laid off and your company says you need to sign this, and it says we're not going to pay you at the end of the month, but we're going to pay you in like 2 months or 3 months, is that legal? And if not, what can you do about it? Or what if you continue working and the company keeps delaying paychecks to you?
Yeah, so I mean, if it's severance pay, that's not as closely, guarded. But if what you're saying is you're going to delay your pay that you're actually working, in general, the Fair Labor Standards Act requires you to be paid on your normal payday, and delay in pay is considered, non-payment of wages. So you can make a complaint to the Wage and Hour Division or to the New York State Department of Labor about the delay in payment. And yeah, even just I mean, just state like, I don't think that's legal. You're supposed to pay me, my regular payday, and hopefully they'll back off. They're probably asking you to sign that agreement because what they're doing is asking you to basically bend the law.
Another question from the chat. Okay, I want to give the facilitators a time to be able to have your session together with folks. We're breaking folks out into 10 breakout rooms, but so you'll be automatically jumping in with one co-facilitator in each room. Thank you again, facilitators, for holding space. If folks, you have any other questions or things you want to discuss from earlier in this call, you can bring it up in the room as well. Is this a room of folks that want to join a breakout but haven't, or just sitting it out?
I accidentally hit cancel on mine. I don't know how to rejoin the one of the breakout rooms.
Okay, let me put you in one right now.
I think Caitlin invited me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Hey, you and I got suddenly got exited from the room. Can you please assign a breakout?
Yeah. Okay. Harsh. Oh, wait. Was it Harsh who said that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Let me find you. Oh, I don't see your name here. One second. I am looking for your name. Okay. Oh, I think it says you're in room 9, but you haven't joined. I'll see if I can resend the invite. Move to room 9. Are you able to join? Great. Tony or Micah or Claudia, would you like to join a room? I think some folks are like all drifting back in, but we actually ran over our time that we were originally planning for our call. So hope that and thank you all so much for coming and being part of this. We're going to keep doing more events like this, and like, regularly we'll have like check-ins for folks that want like job support help. So if you left your email in that survey, I'll be reaching out to you very soon. And thank you all so much for joining and for helping us figure out how best to start our very nascent organization. Many thanks to Tech Worker Coalition for all the incredible work and community that you do, and for holding this space in such an amazing way. And for folks at Civic Spark for volunteering. Thank you for facilitating. I'm going to just close at this point unless anyone else has something they want to say. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this for us.
Yeah, I really appreciate
Thank
all of
you.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
We need more.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
space.
Okay.
Thanks, folks.
Awesome.
Thank you guys for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.